Okay, everybody, thanks so much for being with us. Maureen is going to help us let go of our role as a family caregiver. Maureen, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to start off by letting go of what just happened in the last 15 minutes. Technology is just not my friend. At 58 years old, I really struggle. So I actually had a very difficult time finding the link, and I'm like, am I just going to have to not be here today? And so anyway, I overcame all of that and here I am. So it's wonderful to be here. I have so much gratitude that my dots connected me to Denise and caringways.com, because during my last 2 years, my caregiving journey was through the pandemic, and I certainly needed all of the help I could get. And so I just want to start off with so much gratitude for Denise and others like her. So my name is Maureen McDermott. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I was a caregiver for over 30 years on different levels for my mom. My mom was Elsie McDermott. She passed away at the age of 93 in a long-term care home here in Ontario, a for-profit long-term care home. She passed May 21st, 2021. And that's when she finally lost her shackles, as I put it, of being inside long-term care. The ending was quite difficult. I don't want to focus too much on that, but it definitely needs to be noted the types of conditions that I was experiencing in my caregiving journey towards the end. And it was not ideal. It was not caring. It was very hot. There was no air conditioning. It was dirty. I was sleeping on a bare floor beside my mom in the final days. It was not good. So I want to start off by talking about what happens when your caregiving journey comes to that screeching halt. And with that pandemic, all of the stresses with that, again, we're not going to get into it. We all know it way too well. You don't need me to explain it. So the feels that I got right away, and sorry, let me just start off by saying too, I'm presenting a little bit different format than everybody else. I don't so much have a career in coaching or anything. I just believe in speaking to caregivers and sharing my story in the hopes of helping others and maybe creating some hope in other caregivers. So I won't have an actual slideshow today, but I do have a few pictures that Denise is going to show towards the end, because again, tech and I, not good friends. And I don't seem to see the comments. So if there is any comments, Denise, if you wouldn't mind just interrupting and reading them, if anybody has any questions for me.
Yep, happy to.
That would be great. Thank you. So beginning again after so long, and some of the feelings that I didn't expect was the amount of relief that I felt. I mean, you spend your whole life with your mom, and in an ideal situation, you have a loving, wonderful relationship, and you never want it to end. So being put into that position where we were all very hopeful that it was going to end, that in itself brings up so many feelings of guilt, of anger, sadness, and confusion that you could never imagine wanting to say goodbye to someone. And you still don't want to say goodbye to them, but you will do anything to make the suffering stop, to make the isolation stop. There was months and months and months. I was doing all of this caregiving through a dirty window of this long-term care home because we were denied any access, and communication was very, very little with regards to phone and Skypes and calls and that. So that's really what I want to touch on first. And it is that relief. And when I mentioned that was when my mom lost her shackles. of not so much just long-term care, but that process of when you pass. She had COPD, dementia, and Alzheimer's. I should have mentioned that. And the confusion to watch that for so long as a caregiver was incredibly painful. Interesting that you develop real skills how to navigate through that dementia and Alzheimer's as well. You know, those first times your parents look at you and they don't quite recognize you. Well, what do you do after that? Do you completely hammer them going, no, 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 you have to remember me. Don't you remember this? Don't you remember that? To really understanding the kind of agitation that that brings on with them and getting into a different role in your caregiving. As you know, if they constantly, my mom used to think I was her mom. So I started calling her Hen like she was my daughter. She was from Scotland and using Scottish accents and that. And I could see what it did for her. It completely brought her down. So that's another role that I took on in my caregiving, was basically acting, wanting to run away and cry and pretend it's not happening, but staying in that role of caregiver and how are we going to get through this was really a superpower, making it up as we went along. But let me get back to that feeling of relief, because they're no longer suffering. They're no longer confused. They're no longer in pain, depending on your beliefs. Mine, I'm a Reiki Master. I believe in the spirit world. I believe in our families do gather at the end on the other side in some capacity. So there was that, that gave me a lot of comfort. And knowing that she's not suffering anymore. Then you come back to the caregiver. You're still sitting there. There's an empty bed, but you're still there as the caregiver. And now what? Fast forwarding probably 3 or 4 months of quite a fog that I really don't remember. It was a lot of, obviously, a lot of grieving, but a lot of adjusting. And to be a caregiver, go, 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 go. And it was just so consuming being a caregiver, to stopping and having that huge void and way too much time to think, way too much time to have all those feelings come in and process. And the number one feeling that was so difficult, and Denise asked me this question when we were talking in a podcast before, and it's really important to revisit, is those feelings of guilt. And I can say, and you can read all the memes and you can read all the beautiful quotes. It won't do anything. You are going to feel the guilt. Don't sit with it for too long, but do sit with it. You know, understand that you're going to feel it, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary for you to hang on to. And the sooner you let go of that guilt, the more joy you will have again in your life, the less grief you will have in your life, and you will find that you can move forward, because it is absolutely stagnating. The guilt I felt was from the relief. The guilt I felt was from giving up my role as a caregiver to the long-term care. Sorry, I'm not going to apologize if I do get emotional. I get emotional. I've been through a lot, and we all have. Just giving up part of my caregiving to the long-term care, because I needed help with those things. I was beginning to think that my mom would outlive me caring for her at home. Her needs became so severe that it literally left me with no choice. And that's clearly some things that I'm still working through. Maybe I will always work through. But I know that I did the best that I could. And I know that if I had to do it again today in that crisis that we were in, I probably would have made the same choice. Be a little different now if I knew that there was a pandemic coming. Oh, sorry, I just need a second here. Denise, if you don't mind, if you want to put one of those pictures up of Mom during the isolation. I'm just reading a question. Oh, yeah. So this is Elsie. There's a picture of me outside her window, and that was the first window visit that we had. And it was my birthday, actually. And at the time we thought, oh, okay, this is all right. You know, there's a pandemic coming, a lockdown for 2 weeks or so. You know, it's kind of a smart thing to do. We didn't realize it was going to last 6 months later. So you can see Mom at the beginning of the pandemic, she was kind of smiley and a bit happy. And the picture of Mom and I in the hallway is 2 or 3 days before she passed. And the reason for showing you these is to see the vast difference in what happened during that whole period of isolation. So as you can imagine, everything that I'm telling you, it went on for 2 years, was quite catastrophic. It was, the stress was almost apocalyptic. And I say that because this is the most important person in my life. I have never experienced love for another person like I did for my mom. And to be on the outside of that window looking in and watching her deteriorate, I think with regards to being a caregiver, the starting over in the beginning again, again, it was, sorry, I feel focused on the guilt here. It just seemed to take so long. So let's fast forward. It's been over a year. It took 1 year to get all those firsts over with, the first birthdays, anniversaries, Christmases, etc., without Mom. And looking back and the relationship with my mother, knowing that she would really want me to get my butt moving. She was Scottish and she was very frank. And I could almost sense those messages with Mom, and just started really slowly looking into things that were interesting to me. I ended up finding some courses that I was interested in, and really just started to tune into, it's my time. I did this caregiving for 30 years. I didn't even think about it. It was what I did because my mom had needs that I had to meet. So you don't even realize this whole role that you're into until it stops, if that makes sense. And I have now become a wedding officiant in Ontario. I am a Reiki Master, which has saved my life through this whole process. I'm a professional photographer, and I reach out all over Twitter to connect with other caregivers. This journey that we've been through in the last 2 years is something that I will never forget, never get over, never unsee. And I, in turn, have become a very, very powerful long-term care advocate in Ontario to make the care that happens in long-term care homes for profits, not for profits, to make the dementia care more person-centered, to make the care more conducive to the needs of our seniors, because there's not really a whole lot out there where I could have continued my caregiving role at home, which is what I wanted to do. And with all of the advocating that I do for better, I'm not going to get into it because who wants to talk politics on a Saturday? I know that I will never, ever stop in memory of my mom, in concern for the future of needs for myself, my spouse, my friends, for future generations, my son. A lot of this really needs to stop. And the caregiving role really needs to be more recognized. I'm not sure about how it is there in the States, but I'm sure there's lots and lots of room for improvement on the caregiver role. There needs to be a lot more support for the caregivers as well moving forward. I'm not sure of my time. I feel like I've kind of come to the end, but I do want to share something. I'm wherever you are in your caregiving journey right now. I want you to know that it's okay that you don't know how to move on, because I surely didn't for quite some time. But start with something easy. Start with something easier, like not going back. And I don't mean that into the physical role of the caregiver. I mean, don't go back when you start to grow out of those and letting go of the guilt. And when you're letting go of all the resentments and you're letting go, don't go back to it. The analogy I'm going to leave you with is, you don't have to, when you're on a road trip and you stop for food, you don't go back home and start your trip all over again. You get back in your car and you start from where you are. So always remember that if you fall off and you're lost, you may be depressed. Can say I pretty comfortably, I was suicidal in my depression and my grief. So just remember, you can just get back in that car and keep going. You don't have to go backwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. You've got about 5 minutes left. So yes, so I would love for individuals who have joined us and for you to start the conversation, Maureen. When you think about taking something off hold after caregiving ended that was on hold during caregiving, what was something first that you felt you took off hold?
Self-care. Self-care, sleep, nutrition, rebuilding friendships that had gone astray. But I really think it was the self-care. Like I said, there was one point I honestly thought my mom was going to outlive me. I'm type 2 diabetic. There would be days where I realized I've gone the entire day with no food, no water, no nutrition.
And when did you realize, okay, I've got to get back on track with really taking care of myself?
Mm-hmm. That's a difficult question. Timelines are hard for me after my mom passed, because it feels like I lost a year, to be honest. I really think it was when I started my self-care. As I mentioned, I'm a Reiki Master, so I got back into doing more meditations, more quiet time, more listening to my inner voice. And, it was in those moments I realized I had a lot of making up to do with myself, and that, my role is gone. And now my role as caregiver is caregiver for me. That's not an easy thing to do. self-love. People think it's the selfish thing to do. Putting down boundaries is a selfish thing to do, and it's not. It's the best thing you can do for yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that when you change your focus and you decide, I'm setting boundaries for my own self-care, relationships change. And not necessarily in a way that feels good for you, because you feel like, okay, I'm showing up in my relationships in a different way. And
Yes.
people were used to who you were, and now you are becoming a much better version of yourself because you're taking care of yourself. And that can be difficult for others.
I think it can look intolerant,
Oh,
where
that is
people are used to
yes, yes,
certain things from you, and then when you go, no, people, what do you mean no? It's always
yes,
been like that. That's
yes,
not anymore, because it
yes.
doesn't serve me anymore. And that's one of my biggest things that I always ask myself, does this serve my highest purpose?
Oh, that's
I ended up quitting smoking, which I really leaned on big time during my crisis with my mom, like chain smoking. And that was generational. My mom smoked, my dad smoked, my whole family smoked. And I broke that generational addiction. And that was through self-love and caring for myself. I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself in this position for diseases and the slow, horrible death? I love myself far too much. And I ended up quitting. And that was one of the most powerful things that I did, because it was one of the hardest things that I did. So now everything is kind of secondary. I'm like, well, I quit smoking. Of course I can do that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I've been thinking about quitting and retiring, because I think we hold off on what can we quit and when can we retire. And I think that there are things that we can quit and retire right now because they no longer serve us.
Exactly.
And then it gives room for things that are important to us, like your advocacy work, your work as a wedding officiant. I mean, how awesome is that? And you get to celebrate something beautiful and new, a new beginning as your work with weddings, that I think opens up this idea that I have this future. I think when caregiving ends, we just feel like, oh my gosh, what is my future? I wonder if my future is gone too. And it's this idea that, yes, we have a future and we must pursue it. We
Yeah.
must pursue it because there are additional gifts for us to give to the world.
You and I talked on our podcast, and you asked me what I would like to bring today, or what I would like everybody to leave with today as caregivers. And that one word is hope. We have to have hope, and those feelings, especially, like I said, when your caregiving will stop, and those feelings of guilt and depression, just remember there's always hope. It may not look like it today. So spend the day with your head under the blankets or watching Netflix in bed all day. Do that if that's what that feels like that day, and don't feel guilty about it. Rest, shut it down, unplug, do whatever, because you can get back in that car and continue on that journey on your road trip. Take the breaks.
Okay, we're going to close with that. Thank you so much, Maureen. That was awesome.
Thank you.